Hello everybody, I'm sorry that I'm not present in the symposium, but anyway I'm honored to be invited in this symposium, and I hope what I talk about will be interested by you. Thanks a lot. Hello everybody. The history of human thought has constantly witnessed a struggle between logic and religious beliefs. A faithful Jewish, Christian, or Muslim must accept that some impossible could be possible without asking how or why. This is not an issue of a struggle between established religions or within a religious movement, but simply a matter of faith in the supernatural. Sufism is no exception. It started as one of the Islamic schools of thought. In order to address the how and why questions, a Sufi must be in full obedience of his master and faithfully believe the many miraculous stories and narratives related to the lives of Sufi masters. The stories and narratives of the miraculous events in the lives of Sufi masters are mostly rewritings of the miracles related to Moses, Jesus Christ, Mohammad, and other holy names in the established religions. Sufi literature in both Persian and Arabic languages includes thousands of such stories and narratives, creating the main challenge for historical documentation in Sufi studies. Sufism embraces Muslim asceticism or zuhd, and zuhd, which is also common among the established religions of the world, and promotes believers to live simple lives, distancing oneself from luxury, abstaining from high-ranking social positions, living in a humble dwelling, and being satisfied with the minimum enjoyments of the material life. In the Muslim world, ascetics are associated with the highest levels of spirituality, as evident in the hadith quoted from Prophet Muhammad, al-faqru fakhri. However, in the ascetic tradition and in the Prophet's daily life, faqr did not refer to poverty or deprivation from a normal life. Faqr is disassociation from materialism, and faqir is one who begs for his needs entirely from God and is not seeking aid from other human beings. Beginning in the middle of the 2nd Hijri centuries, some Islamic ascetics, some Zahids, developed groups of followers, sympathizers, and friends who gathered around them at mosque, at Rabat's caravansarais. With the passage of time, such occasional gatherings transformed into regular meetings and became the starting point of the establishment of ascetic groups in various cities and towns. The gathering locations later transferred to Sufi khanaqahs in the 4th Hijri centuries. Meanwhile, some of the Manichaean temples of the northern Khorasan region and Middle Asia were also called khanaqah by their followers. The term Sufi, which is derived from suf, it means wool, which was used for low-quality clothing. The term Sufi, which is derived from suf, meaning wool, which was used for low-quality clothing, was not used for Muslim ascetics before the establishment of their rituals in the 3rd and early 4th century. In some of the classics of Sufi literature, we find the first account that during the 2nd Hijri century, Abu Hashim al-Zahid in the town of Kufa was first one who was called Sufi. It's important to point that, given that he was from city of Kufa, from town of Kufa, this was resulted in misusing or confusion between Kufi and Sufi, and he was not called Sufi. From the late 1st and early 2nd Hijri century, in present-day Iran, and mostly in the greater Khorasan region, including parts of Middle Asia and Afghanistan, the assignments of Arab rulers by Umayyad and Abbasid caliphates created two groups of believers or two types of Muslims. The first were the wealthy and educated families or Dehqanan Khorasan, who adopted moderate approach to the new situation, tried to retain their cultural and financial lives, and preserved their wealth also. The second group were the masses who were poor and needy and were in full obedience of Arab rulers and content with their simple lives. As such, asceticism or Zod found more followers among the poor, some of whom were ascetics who, as I mentioned, began the earliest ascetic gatherings at mosques and caravanserais. In later years, some of them presented meaningful intellectual challenges and opposition to their Arab rulers and toward those Islamic jurisprudences whose rulings could not be justified by Quran or by prophetic traditions. From the late 1st to mid-2nd Hijri centuries, respectable names such as Hassan al-Basri, Malik Dinar, Ibrahim Adham, Fuzayl Ayaz, Habib Ajami, Dawood Ta'i, and an exceptionally intellectual woman of that time, Rabi'a Adawiyya. They appeared in this context. These individuals were considered as pioneers of the Sufi movement without themselves being called Sufi. There exist also thousands of stories, narratives, and quotations related to them, despite the lack of reliable sources or preserved historical documents from their time. For example, according to the 5th Hijri century Sufi writings, Ibrahim Adham is remembered as a king or a governor of the city of Balkh at a time when the entire northern portion of Iran was under Arab rule. According to Sufi writers, Ibrahim Adham descended suddenly from his throne and decided to become a hermit. There is no reliable historic sources to confirm this story. However, based on the most famous Persian epics, the city of Balkh was the capital city of Khianid dynasty from which two powerful kings, Lohrasbekiani and Kaykhosro, had decided to step down from their thrones and went into seclusion. Some Buddhist sources also mention the city of Balkh as the location for the kingdom of Siddhartha Gautama or Buddha, who had left his throne and became a hermit and later founded Buddhism. It's therefore possible that the story of Ibrahim Adham, as it has been described by Sufi writers, could have partially been rewriting of the stories of Buddha or the stories of Lohras and Keikhosrow in the Persian epics. During the second Hijri centuries and later, some individuals who participated at the ascetic gatherings began to maintain the records of what they had heard from their elders or about them. After the establishment of Sufi Khanehas, these notes were compiled in books called Manaqib, Maqalat, Maqamat, or Ma'arif as the virtues of pioneers of Sufism. Kitab al-Nur of Abulfazl Sahlaki از مقامات بایزید بسطامی اسرار توحید فی مقامات شیخ ابی سعید and the classic work of Fariduddin Attar Tazkirat al-Awliya are three of the most famous works of Maqalat or Manaqib or Ma'arif. These and other related works have since been used as means of Sufi education, although they could not be used as historical, accurate sources on the lives and thoughts of Sufi pioneers. Of note is the fact that Attar, who gathered the stories and sayings of 72 famous ascetics and Sufis, he never claimed that his Tazkirat al-Awliya was a historical source. For many years, starting from his youth, Attar maintained notes and records of what he had read or heard. And in the final decade of his life, he compiled them to address the needs or requests of those people interested in the reading about the Sufi pioneers. Returning to what I had mentioned about the thousands of narratives and stories of the miraculous incidents related to the Sufi masters, about Karamat Sufiyya, present them main challenge of documentation in Sufi studies. When I was editing Fariduddin Attar's Tazkirat al-Awliya in the 1960s for my PhD dissertation, I was interested in including a critical approach to Karamat Sufiyya in my introduction. It was important for me to emphasize that these narratives are mostly derived from the imaginations of simple-minded dervishes who expected their master to be a prophet. At that time, more than 60 years ago, the most respected professor of Sufi studies was Ustad Badiuzzamane Forusanfar, who guided my thesis. He advised me that such a statement would become a challenge for my academic future, for my academic life. His reasoning was that regardless of one's belief, Karamat serves as a spiritual throne for Sufi masters. As such, many respected scholars choose to not question its historical authenticity, despite being skeptical about them. Nevertheless, I was quite aware of many comments which had been made by some of the most respected Sufi writers who had expressed that prophetic miracles may not happen to Sufi masters. By the time I realized that in some Quranic verses, there also existed accounts of opponents of the Prophet Muhammad asking him for miraculous signs, for bayyinah, to demonstrate his claim to prophecy. In 3 verses, God advises his prophet to say, stay waiting for that, and I am waiting too. Quranic references to many miracles related to Moses, Jesus Christ, and other prophets mentioned in the Old Testament, Anbiya Bani Israel, are also references to what had been claimed by Jews and Christians. Those references are frequently used to support divine revelation transpired in Quranic verses. More clear is that the Prophet Muhammad would tell his followers that he is a human being like them. Ana basharun mithlukum. Continuing my curiosity and realistic approach to Karamat Sufiye resulted in the compilation of my work Hadith Karamat around 14 years ago. In that work, I have classified those narratives into 10 categories, some as humane or moral acts, and others as faithful attitude of a pious person. A Sufi may see something in his dreams which may later occur in his daily life. It's also acceptable that a human being may experience a spiritual life alongside his material life, and in that material context, he may reach something comprehensive that he would be unable to describe in words. Rumi's reciting of the verses of his Masnavi to his nightly audiences of Konya is a good example. Many times his mind is drowned under the waves of a spiritual inspiration he cannot explain to his audience, and hence he reminds himself to remain silent on those occasions. Among accounts and quotations from famous Sufis, there are some that even the simple-minded dervishes may react to them with disbelief. And such unbelievable stories are the main challenges of documentation in Sufi studies. For example, there is the account of Malik Dinar, an ascetic in the 2nd Hijri century. He was traveling on a ship with no money to pay his fare. When the sailors decided to throw him into the sea, thousands of fish appeared on the surface. Each fish had a golden coin in his mouth. Malik Dinar took one and paid his fare. Then he left the ship, continuing his travel, floating in air. In Sufi stories, this is the source of his being named Malik Dinar, which means the owner of golden coins. But we know that Dinar was the name of his father, who was a black slave. Another astonishing account is the story of Abu Turab Nakhshabi, a third Sufi from Nakhshab or Nakhsab in the northeastern Khorasan. He was not interested in having relationship with women. Sometimes when he is in his spiritual state at midnight, a group of angels or beautifuls of paradise, Hurain, a group and not only one or two, come to him, and he refuses them. They all cry with tears, and finally Rizwan, the gardener of the paradise, intervenes with assurance that if those ladies return into the heaven, Abu Turab will be kind to them when he eventually settles down in the heaven. According to the accounts of two of the most famous Sufi names, Bayazid Bastami and Abu Sa'id al-Khair, when someone asks the master about the ability of walking on water or floating in air, the master, especially Abu Sa'id al-Khair, answers, a man of God is one who lives among people, eats and drinks, goes to the markets, deals with others, buys and sells, but never forgets God for a moment. The main question is that why something similar to or exceeding prophetic miracles should happen to a Sufi. A prophet needs to demonstrate his miraculous abilities to conceive the ordinary people of his divine mission. A Sufi leader, according to the basic sources of Sufism, has no such mission and no need to demonstrate the impossible. This was frequently and clearly articulated by Abul Qasim al-Qushayri, who stated, whatever is like prophets, miracles, is not expected from a Sufi master. The earlier quote from Abu Sa'id al-Khair also implies that the impossible is not expected from a Sufi, and a Sufi should live a normal life and be a faithful servant of God. But Sufism is an educational school within the Islamic culture, and a successful educator must possess a great knowledge and personality compared to those around him. To the beginner students of Sufism, regardless of whether something is possible or impossible, their sheikh is expected to be a prophet. Similarly, when a group gathers around a sheikh, the organizer of the gathering or the sheikh himself demands obedience from the followers. Even at the nightly gatherings of Konya, Rumi, who was a kind and respected patriarch to his pupils, expected obedience from them. In his sixth chapter of the Masnavi, many times he praised the peer as the same level of the prophet, and sometimes he cursed angrily at those who might have hesitated to respect the peer or were not in full obedience. We are here as a symposium to study the life and works of Maulana Jalal Rumi. There are some challenges of documentation in the story of Rumi's life and works. We know that until the age of 38, Rumi himself simply was an instructor at the Islamic schools of Konya and a commentator of the Quran. He was a successor of his father Bahauddin Walad, who also was himself a preacher and commentator until the last days of his life in Konya in the year 628 Hijri. The unexpected appearance and presence of Shamsuddin Tabrizi in Konya between 642 and 645 was an exceptional period during which Rumi and Shams deeply challenged each other's intellectually and then reconstructed their intellectual identities together. It was because of Shams's presence in Rumi's life that the following 30 years of his life became the most creative and fruitful years of Persian Sufi literature. The great master, whom we call Maulana, and his two great works, Divan-e-Shams and Masnavi, are the products of those final decades of Rumi's life. During those 30 years, hundreds of followers, pupils, and friends might have believed in Rumi's spiritual leadership and prophetic qualities. Some of them began to write about him and about their own views of his spirituality. But the most referred works compiled a long time after Rumi's death, Manaqib al-Arifin by Shamsuddin Aflaki and Risale Ahwal Maulana by Faridun Sepahsalar. Both include some reliable and many incredible stories about Rumi and his family, and imagined narratives about his father Bahauddin Walad. Both Aflaki and Sepahsalar included in their writings some narratives and rawayat of the old times when Bahauddin Walad lived in the city of Balkh, and accounts of occasions when he had been invited to other cities of Khorasan simply as a preacher. Of note is that in the works of Aflaki and Sepahsalar, Rumi's father has been referred to as master of Kobravi Sufi of Khorasan. In the early 7th century, for which there is no confirming historical documentation from those years. According to their narratives, Bahauddin Walad had opposed Imam Fakhruddin Razi and Khwarazmshah also, and eventually had escaped from Khorasan to save himself and his family. But according to reliable historical sources, their departure was motivated by something quite different, namely the fears in Khorasan and Khwarazm regarding the possible conquest of Mongols in those years. Notable is also that Fakhruddin Razi had already passed away around 10 years prior to the family's departure, and their travel may have been only for the purpose of pilgrimage to Mecca for Hajj. In order to study Rumi's life, thoughts, and works, and to reach confirmable truth about him, it's important to realize that many of the narratives in the works of Sepahsalar and Aflaki, which were subsequently quoted in the famous work of Nuruddin Abdul Rahman Jami'in, Nafaqat al-Ans, are not confirmed by any historical documents. Therefore, to seek the truth about Rumi's life and his views, one must instead primarily concentrate on his Masnavi and Divan-e-Shams, and secondarily on Maktubat, Fihi Mafi, and his Majalis. Let's ask Rumi about Rumi. I repeat, let's ask Rumi about Rumi to learn about his deepest thoughts, especially through his final work, the Masnavi. What is reported by Aflaki, Sepahsalar, and also by Rumi's eldest son, Sultan Walad, can at times be in contrast with Rumi's own sayings. Those different narratives and sayings which are not supported by Rumi's own works should be considered as a means of educating the Mawlavi dervishes and not as precise and historically confirmable information about Rumi's life and thought. Thank you.